It was a hot afternoon in a quiet American town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. A black SUV rolled slowly into the parking lot outside the local police station. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in sunglasses, black jacket, and boots. His walk was calm, purposeful, controlled. That man was Steven Seagal, but no one there knew that yet. He had just arrived in town to start his new assignment, a quiet appointment that wasn't yet public. Deputy Chief of Police. He'd been brought in to clean up the department, known for arrogance, abuse of power, and chaos. Steven adjusted his shades and walked toward the entrance. But before he could reach the doors, two uniformed officers lounging near their patrol car noticed him. One of them squinted. "Hey, you can't park here." Steven stopped, turned slightly, and replied in his calm, steady tone. "I'm here on official business." The officer smirked. "Official? You don't look official to me. You look like trouble." His partner laughed, crossing his arms. "Yeah, what kind of business are you on, cowboy?" Steven didn't flinch. "You'll find out soon enough." That confidence, quiet and unshakable, only made the officers more irritated. The first one stepped closer, puffing up his chest. "I said move your car." Steven didn't move an inch. He simply said, "Son, I suggest you think twice about how you're talking right now." But the officer wasn't listening. He thought Steven was mocking him. He got right in Seagal's face, trying to intimidate him. And before anyone could react, the officer slapped Steven's sunglasses clean off his face. Gasps rippled through the parking lot. People nearby froze, watching. Even his partner looked shocked. Steven's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't move. He just stared at the man with cold, piercing eyes that said more than any punch ever could. And in that silent moment, the entire tone changed. No one knew it yet, but that officer had just made the biggest mistake of his career. For a long, tense moment, everything around the police station seemed to freeze. Steven Seagal stood still, the slap echoing in the minds of everyone who saw it. His sunglasses lay on the ground beside his boot, the lenses cracked from the impact. The officer who'd hit him smirked, satisfied, like he'd just put an arrogant stranger in his place. He didn't realize he'd just struck his new superior officer. Steven slowly crouched down, picked up the broken sunglasses, and dusted them off without saying a word. His movements were calm, deliberate, almost too calm, the kind that made everyone uneasy. The silence was broken by the officer's voice. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Don't come around here acting tough. We run this station, not you." Steven finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Do you?" he said quietly. The tone, soft, even, carried a weight that made the man hesitate. His partner shifted nervously. "Come on, Mike, maybe just let him go." But the one who'd slapped him wasn't backing down. "What? You scared? This guy's nobody." He took a step closer, pointing his finger right in Steven's face. "I told you to move your damn car before I tow it myself." A small crowd had started to gather, a few civilians from nearby shops, and even a couple of junior officers peeking through the station doors. Everyone could feel it. Something about this man didn't seem ordinary. Steven's voice was calm as ever. "Officer, you're going to want to stop right there." But the cop laughed. "Stop? What are you going to do, arrest me?" Steven gave the faintest smile. "Not yet." The crowd murmured. The second officer finally tried to step in. "Mike, seriously, this doesn't feel right." But before he could finish, Mike shoved him aside and poked Steven's chest. "You think you can walk in here acting like you own the place? You're in our town, pal." Steven didn't even blink. He simply said, "Son, your writing checks your badge can't cash." That line hit harder than any punch could have. The crowd went dead silent. Even the bold officer, for just a second, seemed to lose his confidence. Then, trying to regain control, he barked out, "You're under arrest for obstruction and disorderly conduct." Steven's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Disorderly conduct?" "Yeah," the cop said, trying to sound firm. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The crowd gasped. Phones came out. Cameras started rolling. Steven sighed quietly, the kind of sigh that comes not from fear, but disappointment. He turned slightly, hands loosely open, and said in that calm, controlled tone, "If I were you, I'd put that badge away before you embarrass yourself in front of your whole department." The cop blinked. "What did you just say?" Steven repeated, slower this time. "I said, you're about to embarrass yourself." The partner took a step back. "Mike, stop. He's not just some guy, man. Mike snapped. Then who the hell is he? Steven didn't answer. He didn't have to. He just stood there, steady, confident, unshaken, while the officer fumbled to grab his cuffs. The crowd's energy shifted. Someone whispered, "Isn't that Steven Seagal? The actor? The martial artist guy?" Another voice said, "No way, it is him." The officer froze for a second, hearing the whispers, but brushed it off. "Don't care who he thinks he is," he said loudly. "He's getting cuffed today." Steven shook his head slowly. "You're not hearing me." The officer grabbed his wrist. In one smooth, effortless motion, Steven turned his hand slightly, and suddenly the officer found himself locked in a joint hold, unable to move. His own arm twisted just enough to stop him cold. Steven didn't hurt him, just immobilized him. The move was so fast, so clean, the crowd gasped in unison. Steven leaned in close and whispered, "Now, are you ready to listen?" The officer's face turned red, half pain, half humiliation. He stammered, "Who are you?" Steven looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You'll find out soon." He released the officer's arm, straightened his jacket, and calmly picked up his cracked sunglasses again. The crowd murmured louder now, phones recording from every angle. Steven turned toward the station doors, saying only one line before walking inside. "If this is how you treat the public, we're going to have a serious problem." The two officers stood frozen, one nursing his wrist, the other two stunned to move. By now, everyone watching knew something big was about to happen, because the man they'd just tried to arrest wasn't a random stranger. He was the new deputy chief of police, and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. If you saw someone being disrespected like this, would you stay calm like Steven or fight back? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to say which country or city you're watching from. The atmosphere outside the police station was now electric. Dozens of eyes were fixed on the man who had just walked inside. The same man two officers had disrespected moments earlier. Steven Seagal's presence lingered like quiet thunder. Every step he took toward the station door carried a strange kind of authority, calm, but commanding. The officer he'd restrained was still rubbing his wrist, glaring at him. His partner whispered nervously, "Mike, we really screwed up, man." "Shut up," Mike snapped. "He's not anybody special. He's just some wannabe tough guy." But the doubt in his voice gave him away. A few onlookers approached from across the street, phones in hand. One of them said, "Bro, I swear that's Steven Seagal, the martial artist. He used to work with law enforcement." Mike turned sharply. "He's not Steven Seagal. You think that guy would come here?" But even he didn't sound sure anymore. Before long, two more patrol cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, confused. "What's going on here?" one asked. Mike quickly spoke up, trying to sound confident. "We had a suspect refusing to cooperate. Tried to get physical. I was just about to detain him." The second officer frowned. "Physical? I didn't see him do anything. He just walked inside, calm as can be." Mike scoffed. "Yeah, well, I don't care how calm he looks. You don't ignore an officer's orders." Inside the station, Steven stopped at the front desk. The clerk, a young officer, recognized him instantly and froze mid-sentence. Chief Seagal, sir, I didn't know you were arriving today." Steven gave a short nod. "It's all right. I can see I came just in time." The young officer looked toward the window, where the commotion outside was still visible. "Sir, were those my guys?" Steven glanced back toward the parking lot. "I believe so." The young man's face went pale. "Oh no." Steven didn't respond. He simply adjusted his cracked sunglasses, almost as if putting them back on was a symbol. Patience under fire, strength without anger. Outside, the tension kept rising. Mike was pacing now, muttering, "You think he's really someone important?" His partner nodded. He knew exactly what he was doing. That hold. Nobody moves like that unless they're trained. Mike's voice cracked slightly. "Well, trained or not, he's not going to make a fool out of me." And with that, he stormed toward the station doors. The crowd murmured as he pushed them open and stepped inside. Cameras followed him. Steven stood near the desk, calm, hands behind his back. His presence filled the entire room without him saying a word. Mike pointed and shouted, "You! I told you you're under arrest." The young officer at the desk tried to intervene. "Sir, you can't. Stay out of this," Mike barked. Steven finally turned around, slowly. His eyes locked onto Mike's. He said softly, "You don't know when to stop, do you?" Mike hesitated, but anger got the better of him. You think you can just walk into a police station and act like you own the place? Steven took a step forward, calm but firm. I don't act like I own it, officer. I do. Mike blinked. What? But before Steven could finish, a firm voice came from the doorway. Mike, what the hell do you think you're doing? Everyone turned. A sergeant, mid-50s, authoritative, respected, walked in, his face red with fury. Sir, Mike started, this guy. The sergeant cut him off sharply. This guy what? He turned toward Steven and froze. The room went silent. Chief Seagal, the sergeant whispered. Steven gave a small nod. Good afternoon, Sergeant. Looks like I arrived sooner than expected. The sergeant's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward the two officers, his voice trembling with restrained anger. Do you have any idea who you just laid hands on? Mike's confidence drained from his face. Wait, Chief? As in the chief? The sergeant exploded. The new deputy chief of police, your boss. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Phones were still recording. Mike stepped back, stammering. I didn't know. Sir, he didn't say. Steven interrupted softly. You never asked. That line hit like a hammer. The whole room went quiet again. Mike looked like he wanted to disappear. His partner lowered his head, ashamed. Steven continued, his tone low and steady. This is exactly why I'm here. Power without respect is chaos. And chaos ends today. The sergeant nodded in agreement. Chief Seagal, I'll handle this immediately. Steven raised a hand slightly. No need for anger. Just accountability. He turned and began walking toward the chief's office, his boots echoing across the floor, each step a reminder of quiet authority. The crowd outside watched through the glass, whispering. Within minutes, the story had already started spreading across social media. And those two officers, the ones who thought they ran the station, realized they had just made the mistake of a lifetime. If you were in Steven's place right now, would you stay calm and let respect teach the lesson, or would you call them out on the spot? Tell me below, and let me know which country or city you're watching from. The entire police station felt like time had stopped. Every eye was fixed on Steven Seagal, the man who, just minutes ago, had been slapped in public like an ordinary civilian. Now, that same man stood in the middle of the room as the new deputy chief of police. The realization hit everyone differently. Some were shocked, some ashamed. Others suddenly stood straighter, realizing who they were really in the presence of. Steven looked calm, too calm. The kind of calm that came from deep self-control. The kind that comes only when a man has nothing left to prove. Sergeant Harris, the seasoned officer who'd just walked in, was visibly furious at his subordinates. Chief Seagal, I can't begin to express, he started, but Steven raised a hand, cutting him off gently. Let's not start with apologies, Steven said quietly. Let's start with understanding. His voice carried through the room, firm but even, a voice that could command a room without shouting. Everyone stood silent. Even the phones that had been recording lowered slightly, as people realized this was no longer entertainment, it was a lesson. Steven turned his eyes toward Officer Mike, the same man who had slapped him. Officer, he said evenly, step forward. Mike hesitated. His hands were trembling slightly. He took a slow step closer. Yes, sir. Do you remember what I said to you outside? Steven asked. Mike nodded weakly. You said, I was about to embarrass myself. Steven nodded. And did you? The officer swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I did. Steven studied him for a long moment. Not with anger, but with the sharp, thoughtful look of a man weighing someone's soul. Then he asked, why did you stop me? What did you see? Mike hesitated again. I saw a guy standing near a restricted parking zone. I told you to move, but you didn't. Steven nodded slowly. And what made you think aggression was the right response? Mike's voice dropped. I don't know, sir. You didn't seem respectful. Steven's eyes narrowed just slightly. Did you ever think, maybe respect has to be given before it's received? The room stayed deathly quiet. No one moved. Even the sergeant's face softened as the lesson sank in. Steven continued. When you wear that badge, it doesn't give you power over people. It gives you responsibility for people. He stepped closer, his tone deepening. And when you lose respect, when you let pride take control, that badge becomes meaningless. Mike lowered his head, his voice shaking. You're right, sir. I crossed the line. I wasn't thinking. Steven looked at him for a moment longer, then said, You made a mistake. But mistakes can teach. What matters is how you fix them. He turned toward the sergeant. Sergeant Harris, I want Officer Mike suspended for 3 days, unpaid, and assigned to community duty for the next month. He'll work with the youth outreach team and learn what real service looks like. The sergeant nodded immediately. Yes, Chief. Understood. Mike looked surprised. He'd expected to be fired. You're not dismissing me? Steven shook his head. If I fired every man who made a mistake, we'd have no one left to teach the next generation. I'd rather you learn than run. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Officers exchanged glances, some in awe, others quietly nodding in agreement. Then Steven's tone shifted slightly. But let me make something very clear to everyone here, he said, scanning the room. This station isn't about fear. It's about discipline, respect, and service. You will treat every citizen the way you treat your own family. I don't care what they look like, where they come from, or what they drive. He paused. The weight of his words settled like stone. Because if you can't see the humanity in someone, you don't deserve the uniform. The room erupted in silent reflection. Even the crowd outside, who could still see through the glass, fell quiet, as if the truth in his words had reached beyond the station walls. Sergeant Harris stepped forward. Chief Seagal, I think we all needed to hear that. Steven nodded slightly, his expression softening. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came to remind you all why we wear this badge in the first place. He turned and began walking toward his new office. But just before entering, he looked back at the group, his tone calm again. And one more thing, he added. Next time you see a stranger in this uniform's parking lot, maybe start with good morning before you start with move your car. A few officers smiled nervously. Even Mike couldn't help but let out a faint, humbled chuckle through his embarrassment. Steven disappeared into his office, the glass door closing quietly behind him. The sergeant turned toward the two embarrassed officers and said, You two are lucky. Anyone else would have thrown you out today. Instead, you got a masterclass in humility. Outside, the bystanders who had filmed the incident were already posting their videos. Within hours, the clips would explode online. People shocked to see a famous martial artist and actor show more discipline and grace than most could in such a situation. But for Steven, it wasn't about going viral. It was about proving a point. Respect isn't earned through power, it's earned through character. If you were in Steven's position, would you forgive those officers or demand stricter punishment? Drop your opinion below and tell me what country or city you're watching from. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of views turned into millions overnight. Clips of the officer slapping Steven Seagal, then realizing he'd assaulted the new deputy chief of police, were playing on every social media feed, every news broadcast, every phone screen. Some headlines screamed, Cop slaps Steven Seagal, instantly regrets it. Deputy chief teaches powerful lesson in humility. Steven Seagal's calm response goes viral worldwide. At first, the police department tried to keep things quiet, but it was too late. The story had taken a life of its own. People weren't just sharing the clip for entertainment. They were sharing it because of how Steven responded. No shouting, no violence, no ego, just calm authority and wisdom. At the precinct, things were different now. Officers who had barely noticed the new deputy chief before now stood a little taller when he walked by. They spoke softer, listened more, and even the sergeant made sure respect was at the core of every shift briefing. Steven, meanwhile, didn't bask in the attention. He wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in change. Inside his new office, he sat quietly reviewing reports when Sergeant Harris walked in with a tablet. Chief, he said, you might want to see this. Steven looked up. What is it? Harris handed him the tablet. The video. It's gone global. Every outlet's talking about it. Steven tapped play. On screen, he saw himself standing calmly as the officer yelled. Then that moment of quiet control when he said, You're about to embarrass yourself. He sighed softly and set the tablet down. It's a shame it takes humiliation to start a conversation, he said. Harris nodded. Still, sir, the public's reacting well. They're calling you an example of restraint. Even the mayor wants to meet with you. Steven leaned back in his chair, his tone thoughtful. Restraint shouldn't be viral. It should be normal. Outside, in the main room, the same officer, Mike, was finishing his paperwork before heading out for his suspension. He'd been quiet all morning, head down, clearly ashamed. When Steven walked past, Mike stood up immediately. Sir, he said nervously. "I wanted to thank you." Steven paused. "For what?" "For not ending my career yesterday," Mike said, eyes low. "You had every right to. I acted like a fool." Steven studied him for a moment. "You acted like a human. But now it's your turn to act like a better one." Mike nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'm going to make it right." Steven placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Start with the community center on 5th Street. Teach the kids about respect. You'll learn something too." Mike nodded again, grateful, and left quietly. Later that day, reporters began crowding outside the precinct, shouting questions. "Chief Seagal, what do you think about the officer's actions? Do you believe racism or abuse of power played a role? Do you plan to take legal action?" Steven stepped out, calm as ever, holding a short statement in his hand. The flashing cameras didn't faze him. He raised his voice slightly. "I've seen the footage," he began. "I've read the comments. And I want to say one thing clearly. What happened yesterday wasn't about me. It was about what happens when pride replaces respect." The reporters fell silent. He continued. "The badge on your chest isn't a weapon. It's a promise. A promise to protect people, not to judge them. We all make mistakes, but how we correct them defines who we are." One reporter asked, "Are you angry about what happened?" Steven shook his head slightly. "Anger doesn't fix ignorance. Education does." He looked straight into the cameras. "Let this be a reminder, whether you wear a badge, a uniform, or regular clothes. We all deserve to be treated with dignity." Then, with his trademark calm, he ended with, "And to the officer who made that mistake, I've already spoken to him. He's learning. We all are." The crowd applauded softly. It wasn't the loud, chaotic applause of a press conference. It was the kind of quiet respect that comes when truth hits deep. That clip too, just like the confrontation, went viral. Within hours, hashtags like #RespectLikeSeagal and #CalmPower started trending worldwide. Teachers showed the clip in classrooms. Police academies replayed it during ethics training. Even celebrities reposted it with captions like, "This is real leadership." That night, Steven sat alone in his office again, looking out the window at the city lights. Sergeant Harris entered quietly. "Sir," he said, "if I may, you've done more for this department in 2 days than some chiefs do in 2 years." Steven gave a small smile. "Change starts one person at a time, Sergeant. Even if that person is the one wearing the badge." Outside, the station was calm. The chaos had faded. But the message, respect, humility, strength, was echoing far beyond those walls. Because sometimes, one man's calm in the face of disrespect can teach millions what true power really looks like. If the world had more leaders like Steven, calm, strong, and fair, do you think people would trust authority again? Comment your thoughts below and tell me what country or city you're watching from. The days that followed felt like something out of a movie. Every news channel, podcast, and talk show was covering the story. The clip of Steven Seagal standing calmly after being slapped by a cop had now crossed 50 million views worldwide. But what people admired most wasn't his fame, his martial arts past, or even his title. It was his restraint. The fact that a man known for action chose calm over chaos. Across social media, comments poured in. He handled that like a real leader. Imagine the control it takes to stay that calm after getting hit. This is how authority should look. Even officers from other cities began speaking up, saying they felt inspired to be better examples of service and humility. What started as a moment of humiliation had become a global lesson in grace under fire. Inside the department, the energy had changed completely. The younger officers watched Steven differently now, not as a celebrity, but as a mentor. The older ones respected his discipline, realizing he led not with rank, but with example. One morning, Sergeant Harris entered Steven's office holding a folder. "Chief, the mayor wants to invite you to a city conference next week," he said. "They want you to talk about respect and reform in law enforcement." Steven nodded thoughtfully. "Tell them I'll be there." Then, almost as an afterthought, he asked, "How's Officer Mike doing?" Harris smiled faintly. "You're not going to believe this, sir. He's been volunteering at the youth center every day, even off duty. He's teaching self-defense and respect to teenagers. The same community he once ignored." Steven raised an eyebrow. "Good. That's what redemption looks like." Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was Mike himself, standing nervously with a paper in hand. "Come in," Steven said. Mike stepped inside, visibly uneasy. "Sir, I just wanted to say something before I leave for the day." Steven gestured to the chair across from him. "Go ahead." Mike sat down, clutching the paper. "This is an open letter I wrote. To the public. To apologize. Not because I was told to, but because I need to." Steven nodded, saying nothing, allowing the officer to continue. Mike took a deep breath and began reading. "To everyone who's seen the video of what happened, I was the officer who disrespected Deputy Chief Seagal. What I did was wrong. I acted out of pride, not professionalism. I forgot what this badge stands for." He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "But that man I disrespected didn't destroy my career. He saved it. Because instead of anger, he showed patience. Instead of revenge, he showed me what real strength is. I want people to know, authority means nothing if it's not backed by respect." When Mike finished, his hands were trembling. "I'd like to publish this, sir, if you approve." Steven leaned back, studying him for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You don't need my approval, son. You already earned it." Mike exhaled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, sir, for everything." Steven smiled faintly. "Just keep walking the right path. That's thanks enough." 2 days later, Mike's letter went public. Within hours, it went viral, shared by millions, praised by people who said it was rare to see accountability and humility from someone in uniform. The story had shifted again. It was no longer about shame. It was about growth. Reporters now called it the Seagal Standard, a new model of leadership built on calm, respect, and empathy. At the city conference the following week, Steven walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. Police chiefs, politicians, teachers, and community leaders from across the country had gathered to hear him speak. He waited for the applause to fade before saying, in his calm baritone, "Respect isn't weakness. It's strength, because it takes discipline to stay calm when others lose control." He paused, scanning the crowd. "We live in a time when everyone wants to be heard, but few want to listen. If we want peace in our streets, we have to start with peace in our hearts." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Then Steven said something that struck deep. "When that officer struck me, he didn't just hit a man. He hit the idea of what happens when we stop seeing each other as people. I forgave him, not because I had to, but because if I didn't, the cycle continues." The room erupted in applause, not the loud kind, but the genuine kind that comes from people feeling something true. After the conference, reporters rushed to interview him again, but Steven simply said, "I didn't teach anyone anything new. I just reminded them what they already knew but forgot. Respect is free, but priceless." That night, Officer Mike watched the replay of Steven's speech from the youth center, surrounded by kids who now looked up to him. He smiled softly and said, "That's my boss." The boy next to him asked, "The one you hit?" Mike nodded. "Yeah, and he's the one who taught me how to stand tall again." Would you forgive someone who disrespected you if it helped them become better? Or do you believe some actions deserve no forgiveness? Share your thoughts below, and tell me what country or city you're watching from. By the end of the week, the story had gone completely viral. Every corner of the internet was talking about it. Clips of the incident were shared across social media platforms in multiple languages, accumulating tens of millions of views. News channels replayed the footage endlessly, first showing the slap, then Steven Seagal's calm response, and finally the officer's public apology. The hashtags #RespectLikeSeagal and #CalmPower were trending worldwide. People were inspired by the sheer restraint Steven had displayed and the officer's willingness to change. In classrooms, teachers showed the video to students, teaching lessons on humility, leadership, and accountability. In police academies, instructors replayed the footage, emphasizing the importance of self-control, respect for others, and ethical behavior. Even celebrities and public figures joined the conversation, praising Steven's example. Many shared the video, highlighting how leadership is about discipline, respect, and integrity, not intimidation or ego. Inside the precinct, life was different. Officers walked with purpose and respect, knowing their new deputy chief led not by fear, but by example. The once haughty officers who had humiliated Steven now wore a mix of pride and humility, proud to be part of the department, humbled by the lesson they had learned. Mike, the officer who had slapped him, had transformed completely. He was still on his community service rotation, teaching respect, self-defense, and leadership to teenagers at the local youth center. He often shared the story of how Steven Seagal had turned a moment of humiliation into a lesson for everyone, including him. When asked by a reporter how he felt seeing the incident go viral, Mike said, "I've learned more from Chief Seagal in one day than I learned in 10 years on the force. His example taught me humility, strength, and the meaning of respect. I'll never forget it." Steven, however, stayed grounded. He didn't take the praise personally. Instead, he used the platform to remind people of a universal truth. Power doesn't come from fists, fame, or badges. Power comes from patience, understanding, and the ability to do what's right, even when it's hard. The mayor of the city publicly commended Steven, acknowledging how his actions had inspired both citizens and law enforcement. The department received letters from schools, local organizations, and even international groups praising the culture of respect that Steven had instilled. Even more surprisingly, other departments across the country began using the incident as a training example, showing how calm authority can de-escalate conflict, promote understanding, and create lasting change. Back in the precinct, Steven watched the news coverage quietly. Sergeant Harris approached him and said, "Sir, you've not only changed our department, you've changed how the world sees law enforcement." Steven nodded slightly. "I didn't change anything. I just reminded people what they already know but forget sometimes, that respect is free, but priceless." Later that evening, he walked through the now quiet station, glancing at the officers finishing their shifts. Some gave him a small nod of gratitude. Others simply smiled. He didn't need applause. The change in their behavior was the reward. Outside, the city went on, but the story continued to inspire millions around the globe. People shared it with friends, families, and colleagues, creating conversations about respect, accountability, and leadership that reached far beyond that small town. And in every corner of the world where someone watched the clip, the message was clear. True strength isn't in retaliation. True power isn't in control over others. It's in humility, patience, and the courage to do what's right. For Steven Seagal, the lesson was complete. One slap, one calm response, and one decision to lead by example had turned humiliation into a worldwide movement for respect. And the man who had disrespected him? He would never forget that day, not because of fear, but because he had been taught the value of humility and the true meaning of leadership. If you believe respect should be earned through character, not force or fame, type respect in the comments and share this story. Let's spread lessons like this worldwide.